Hello and welcome to Agri-History. In this episode, we will cover the domestication of a broad range of crops. In this case, we'll cover squash, melon, and watermelon. We will discuss the origins, domestication, and archaeology of these species. The common watermelon is part of the genus Citrullus. Other than the sweet watermelon, there are several other species of watermelon, such as the Agusi, Citron, and Coleomph watermelons. Based on current genetic evidence, it is suggested that the Agusi watermelon is the ancestor to our sweet watermelon. This is due to the genetic data that shows similarities between both species and the limited genetics of the founder population of watermelon. The Agusi watermelon is used for its high carb and protein seeds, which are harvested as a staple crop in parts of Nigeria and the Congo. Further genetic evidence seems to suggest, however, that this is not the case due to high barriers between both species and the limited ability for reproduction between the two species. Right now, the most widely accepted hypothesis is that watermelon was domesticated from a citron watermelon, although that hypothesis comes with some difficulties as well due to the fact that the progeny of both species hybridizing together produces pollen that's weaker than both species. The newest hypothesis seems to be that watermelon were bred from an ancient species of uncultivated wild watermelon that range from the Sudan to Egypt. In terms of how old the species is, we found preserved watermelon in Egypt, both fruit and seeds, with fruit that are 4,500 years old and seeds that are 4,000 years old. These are seeds of probably the sweet watermelon, although it could be another watermelon species that was cultivated at the same time. Later digs recovered seeds that were 5,000 years old of sweet watermelon. You can tell that it's sweet watermelon because of its distinctive features of the distinctive bulging margins of the seed near the hilum end. These features are not found in other species of watermelon cultivated by people. We've also found watermelon dating between 800 and 650 BC. And more seeds were found dated to the Roman era. Now, based on current archaeological evidence, most of the writings of watermelon and the distribution of most of the watermelon species seems to be in Africa. As such, it is likely that watermelons were domesticated in Africa. Watermelon were later transferred alongside slaves to North America and were further improved through breeding in our area. Later on in the 1950s, researchers figured out how to make seedless watermelon. They did so by doubling the chromosomes of a regular watermelon to make a tetraploid watermelon. This was crossed with a diploid watermelon to create a triploid watermelon. This watermelon could not produce any seeds, creating a seedless watermelon. The next melon on our hit list is the common musk melon. Common forms of this species include cantaloupe and honeydew melon. The wild forms of this species, also known as Cucurbita mellow, are found in Africa, Asia, and Australia. Based on current genetic analysis, it was postulated that all domesticated melons came from Asia, but we've also seen wildly diverse genetics in African populations of melon, and the oldest known melon seeds are found in Africa as well, dating between 3700 BC and 3500 BC, in comparison to the oldest ones found in China, which date to 3000 BC. Through studying all the populations of wild melon in their natural habitat by comparing the genetics of the wild strains with the genetics of our cultivated strains, we have found 2 strains that have led to all our cultivars available today. The Asian/Australian melons and the African melons. It was also found that in certain populations of African melons there was some hybridization between African and Asian melons. And based on current evidence, melons were domesticated twice independently, once in Australia and Asia, and once in Africa. We learned this through observing multiple genetic differences in the genome of the African strains versus the Asian strains, with only 2 groups of cultivars in Africa having a hybridization of both genomes, the Fadashi melon and the Tabish melon. Squash are a series of species that have been bred to make pumpkins, squashes, and gourds. These species include Cucurbita pepo, Cucurbita moschata, Cucurbita agrosperma, and Cucurbita maxima. Cucurbita moschata was cultivated and domesticated in South America. This occurred between 10,000 and 7,000 years ago BP in Ecuador, and in the Colombian Amazon between 9300 and 8000 BP. This species was used to breed butternut squash. Cucurbita pepo was domesticated 10,000 years ago in Mesoamerica BP, based on radiocarbon dating of plant samples found in caves in Mexico. This species was also cultivated in North America as well. This species was used to breed summer squash, pumpkins, zucchini, and acorn squashes. That concludes our video on squash, watermelon, and regular melon. Stay tuned for the final episode of Season 7, where we will cover potatoes. Stay lit, fam.